England, August 1323. The Tower of London stands as the most feared fortress in all of Europe. Behind its 15-foot thick walls, prisoners vanish. Some are tortured, some are forgotten. Almost none escape. At the base of the White Tower, 30 feet below ground level, sits Roger Mortimer, once the most powerful lord in Wales, commander of armies, conqueror of Ireland, a man who made kings tremble. Now he is prisoner 847, condemned to die. 3 days ago, King Edward II intercepted a letter written in Mortimer's own hand, a letter calling for rebellion against the crown. The penalty for treason is not simple death. It is to be hanged until almost dead, cut down while still conscious, disemboweled while watching your own organs burn, and finally quartered. Your pieces sent to the four corners of the kingdom as a warning to others. The execution warrant will arrive within days. For Mortimer, there are only two options: escape or die screaming. But escaping a medieval dungeon isn't like escaping a modern prison. There are no ventilation shafts to crawl through, no windows large enough for a human body. The architecture itself is designed to make escape physically impossible. Mortimer doesn't know it yet, but he's about to attempt one of the most daring escapes in medieval history. If he fails, the torture chambers await. Mortimer presses his back against the cold stone wall of his cell. The chill seeps through his clothing into his bones. It never stops. Day or night, summer or winter, the cold is constant. This is by design. The walls are constructed from Kentish ragstone, a dense limestone that absorbs moisture from the Thames and the surrounding earth. The stone sweats constantly, creating perpetual dampness that breeds disease and saps the strength of anyone forced to live against it. Medieval architects understood something fundamental about imprisonment. The building itself should be the primary jailer. The walls of the tower's dungeons measure between 12 and 15 feet thick at the base. To put that in perspective, a modern brick wall is typically 8 inches thick. These walls are nearly 20 times thicker. Even with modern tools, digging through would take months. With a spoon smuggled from dinner, years, decades, longer than any prisoner would survive. Mortimer looks up. Above him, a small iron grate, just wide enough to let in a sliver of light, just narrow enough to remind him that freedom exists somewhere beyond these stones. The grate is 8 inches wide. Even a child couldn't fit through it, but the placement is deliberate. Prisoners can see it from anywhere in the cell, a constant reminder of what they've lost. Psychological torture more effective than any rack. Based on Mortimer's observations during his 18 months of imprisonment, he's mapped the layout in his mind. Connecting to his cell are 3 levels of security. He's in the deepest level. The entrance is where guards can quickly respond in case of disturbance. The deeper you go, the closer you get to the main interrogation and storage areas. This includes torture chambers, supply rooms, and his current location, the high security cells. At the very top is the only way out, the main halls, the constable's quarters, and the heavily guarded gates. To escape, Mortimer will need to pass through at least 7 locked doors and 2 guarded gates. And even then, he'll face a 40-foot drop into a moat filled with sewage from the castle. Too polluted to swim, too wide to jump. Most prisoners never make it past the first door. But Mortimer knows something the guards don't. Tonight is the feast of St. Peter ad Vincula. The guards will be drinking. Even if Mortimer escapes his cell, the real dangers lie ahead. Medieval dungeons weren't just rooms. They were killing machines. Each dungeon system could hold more than 30 unique traps. Some crushed, some impaled. Some drove men insane before they died. The most common was the pit trap, a section of floor that appeared solid but wasn't. One wrong step and the victim plunged into darkness. At the bottom, sharpened wooden stakes, each one hardened by fire and positioned to pierce vital organs, but not to kill instantly. The stakes were designed to wound, to trap, to leave the victim impaled and screaming, unable to climb out, waiting for death that might take hours. sometimes days. Some pits had their stakes smeared with human feces, not to kill faster, but to infect, to rot the flesh from within while the victim still lived. Other traps used animals. At Warwick Castle, a narrow passage contained a hidden chamber in the ceiling. Inside, European adders, venomous snakes common to England. If a prisoner touched the wrong stone, a thin trigger would pull a toggle, causing the wooden panel to swing open. The snakes would drop onto their head and shoulders. In the darkness of a dungeon with no anti-venom, a bite meant certain death. But first came hours of agony as the venom attacked the nervous system, causing internal bleeding and organ failure. Most soldiers turn back when they see what lies ahead. But Mortimer can't. His life depends on getting out. Château de Pierrefonds in France took a different approach. Certain cells contained floor grates that could be opened from above. Below the grates, starving rats, dozens of them, sometimes hundreds. The rats couldn't reach the prisoner at first, but as the prisoner weakened from lack of food and water, the guards would lower the floor, inch by inch, day by day, until the rats could reach. They always started with the feet, then the legs. The screaming could last for hours. Other dungeons used dogs, mastiffs bred for aggression, kept hungry, released into corridors when an escape was detected. In the narrow passages, there was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. The Tower of London favoured mechanical traps, pressure plates connected to crossbows mounted in walls, trip wires attached to bells that alerted guards instantly, doors rigged to swing shut and lock automatically, trapping escapees in narrow kill zones where they could be dealt with at leisure. Some corridors featured ceiling panels that would drop when triggered, releasing loads of heavy stones, not enough to kill instantly, just enough to pin a man to the ground, unable to move, waiting for guards to arrive. Through centuries of holding prisoners, medieval engineers had learned to use every inch of their dungeons to kill any would-be escapee. Mortimer has heard the stories. He knows what awaits in those corridors, but he also knows he has no choice. Not all dungeons were designed for prisoners who might one day be released. Some were designed for those meant to disappear forever. The oubliette. The word comes from the French oublier, meaning to forget. And that was precisely its purpose, to make a person cease to exist while still technically alive. An oubliette was a vertical shaft, typically 15 to 30 feet deep, accessible only through a trap door in the ceiling. The chamber at the bottom was often so narrow that a prisoner couldn't sit down, couldn't lie down, could only stand in complete darkness until death. At Warwick Castle, the oubliette was horizontal, a tunnel barely 3 feet high and 6 feet long. The floor was paved with jagged stones that jutted upward at irregular angles, making it impossible to find any position of comfort. A prisoner couldn't stand, couldn't sit comfortably, couldn't lie flat. They could only crouch on those stones, the ceiling inches above their head, their knees and elbows pressing into sharp edges, for as long as they survived. Escape from an oubliette was not difficult, it was physically impossible. The prisoner would be lowered by rope. Once at the bottom, the rope was pulled up, the trapdoor closed, and they were forgotten. There was no food, no water, only the slow certainty of death. Some oubliettes were never cleaned. New prisoners were dropped on top of the bones of previous victims. In total darkness, they would land on skulls and rib cages, knowing they would soon join them. At Leap Castle in Ireland, the oubliette had wooden spikes at the bottom. Prisoners dropped into this chamber would be impaled but not killed instantly. They would hang on the spikes, bleeding slowly for days. Mortimer's cell is bad, but he knows it could be worse. Much worse. If his escape fails, the oubliette might be waiting. Back in his cell, Mortimer constantly heard about the king's justice, how the crown protected England, how traitors deserved their fate. But when he arrived in the tower, the reality felt completely different. Everything was designed for one purpose, to break the human spirit. That's because he had only been told one side of the story. The traps weren't the only thing waiting for failed escapees. The tower had something worse. The torture chamber. The rack was the centerpiece, a wooden frame with rollers at each end. The victims' wrists were chained to one roller, their ankles to the other. As the torturer turned the handles, the body was slowly stretched. First came pressure, an uncomfortable sensation that grew gradually worse. Then came the popping sounds, joints beginning to separate. Shoulders first, usually, then hips, then knees and elbows. The victim would scream. They always screamed. The sound echoed through the tower's stone corridors, reaching prisoners in distant cells. A reminder of what awaited those who refused to cooperate. The rack's true power wasn't in its use, it was in its presence. Prisoners were shown the device before interrogation. The mere sight of the stained wood and rusted chains was often enough to extract confessions. The scavenger's daughter worked on the opposite principle. Instead of stretching, it compressed. The victim was forced into a crouching position while an iron frame tightened around them. Eventually, ribs cracked. Blood flowed from the nose, ears, even fingertips, as internal pressure built beyond bearing. The strappado suspended prisoners by their wrists tied behind their back. The shoulders dislocated almost immediately. Then weights were added to the ankles, increasing the strain. Or they could raise and drop the victim repeatedly, each fall jerking the arms violently upward. These instruments served a dual purpose. They extracted information, and they ensured that even if a prisoner escaped their cell, they would be too broken to climb walls or run from guards. Mortimer hasn't been tortured. Yet, he is too valuable, too politically connected. But he has seen the chamber. He has smelled the blood. He knows what awaits if he fails tonight. The plan has been months in the making. Bishop Adam Alton, one of Mortimer's allies from before his imprisonment, made contact with Gerard de Alspay, the sub-lieutenant of the tower. Alspay was responsible for day-to-day prisoner management. He had access to keys, schedules, and the layout of the fortress. Alspay was also underpaid, overworked, resentful of his superiors, the perfect target for corruption. For a sum that would allow him to start a new life abroad, Alspay agreed to help. Over several weeks, Alspay had been weakening a section of the kitchen wall, loosening stones, crumbling mortar. The kitchen was due for repairs anyway. No one noticed a few extra cracks. The Feast of St. Peter ad Vincula was chosen deliberately. The one night each year when discipline at the tower relaxed completely. Wine flowed freely. Guards toasted their patron saint with cup after cup. But Alton wasn't taking chances. The wine had been dosed with poppy extract, enough to induce deep sleep, not enough to kill or raise suspicion of murder. Rope ladders had been smuggled into the tower over several weeks, hidden in shipments of food and supplies. They now waited at pre-arranged locations along the inner and outer walls. A boat was positioned on the Thames, crewed by men loyal to Alton. They would wait until the early hours, watching for a signal. If all went according to plan, Mortimer would be out of England by sunrise. If anything went wrong, he would be dead. The sounds of celebration have faded. The tower is silent. Mortimer waits in darkness, counting heartbeats, counting minutes. 3 soft taps on his cell door, then 2 more. The signal. Gerard de Alspay appears with a key. His face is pale, sheened with sweat. He is terrified. "Quickly," he whispers. "The guards are out, but not for long." Mortimer moves through the corridors in near total darkness. He's memorized the route. 23 steps to the first turn, 14 more to the stairwell, up 12 stairs to the kitchen level. They pass a guard post. 2 men slumped over a table, cups still in their hands. One is snoring. The poppy extract worked. Suddenly, Mortimer freezes. A faint sound ahead, scratching, clicking on stone. His heart races. Rats, just rats, scurrying through the walls. Not guards, not dogs, not yet. He keeps moving. The kitchen, the weakened wall section. Alspay pushes, and the stones give way with a grinding sound that seems impossibly loud in the silence. A hole. just large enough for a man to crawl through. Beyond the wall, the inner ward stretches dark and empty. Guards are visible at their posts, but none are moving. Slumped, silent. The drugged wine has done its work. Now comes the hardest part. The inner curtain wall. 40 feet of sheer stone. Mortimer finds the rope ladder by touch, hidden exactly where it was supposed to be. He begins to climb. His arms ache. 18 months of confinement have weakened him more than he realized. Every rung brings burning pain to muscles that have forgotten how to work. He reaches the top, lies flat on the narrow walkway, gasping. Then he finds the second ladder and descends into the gap between the inner and outer walls. Another climb. His hands, raw from the rope, leave smears of blood on every rung. He can feel his grip weakening. The outer wall, the final barrier. At the top, Mortimer looks out over London. The city spreads before him, dark and sleeping. The Thames glimmers in what little moonlight pierces the clouds. And there, at the water's edge, a boat. He doesn't have another rope ladder. The final descent will be a jump. 15 feet, in darkness, onto ground he cannot see clearly. He thinks of the rack, of the oubliette, of the stakes smeared with feces, of the snakes and the rats, and the screaming he has heard echoing through these corridors. He jumps. The impact drives the air from his lungs. Pain lances through his ankle. Something might be broken. He doesn't have time to check. He runs, limping, staggering, every step agony. The boat. Men reaching out to help him, hands pulling him over the gunwale, oars splashing into the water. The Tower of London recedes into the darkness behind him. Roger Mortimer is free. His escape changed the course of English history. In France, Mortimer joined forces with Queen Isabella, the wife of Edward II. They became lovers. Together, they raised an army. In 1326, they invaded England. Edward II was captured, forced to abdicate, and later died under mysterious circumstances. Many historians believe Mortimer ordered his murder. For 3 years, Mortimer ruled England as the most powerful man in the kingdom. Not as king, he was too clever for that, but as the power behind the throne. But power attracts enemies, and Mortimer had made many. In 1330, the young King Edward III staged a coup. Mortimer was arrested at Nottingham Castle, dragged through a secret passage by men who knew of its existence. The very tactic that had freed him would now trap him. This time, there would be no escape. Roger Mortimer was hanged at Tyburn on November 29th, 1330. His body was left on the gallows for 2 days as a warning to any who would challenge royal authority. The man who escaped the inescapable met his end on a rope, 7 years after he scaled the walls of the Tower of London. Medieval dungeons stand as one of history's most sophisticated systems of human control. They combined architecture and psychology, walls and despair, physical traps and mental cages, snakes and rats and sharpened stakes alongside darkness and isolation. The builders understood that true imprisonment required breaking the prisoner's belief that escape was possible. The cold, the darkness, the instruments of torture displayed like promises, the animals waiting in hidden chambers, the pits lined with feces-smeared spikes. Every element served to crush the human spirit before it could even conceive of resistance. The Tower of London held prisoners for 850 years, only 40 ever escaped, most through bribery or political favor, true physical escapes, perhaps a dozen in nearly a millennium. And yet, throughout history, some always found a way. They used courage and desperation and allies in unexpected places. They defeated systems designed by the finest military engineers of their era. Medieval dungeons worked. For most prisoners, most of the time, escape was truly impossible, but not for everyone. And perhaps that's the most terrifying truth for those who build prisons, whether of stone or of law or of ideology. No cage is perfect. No system is unbreakable. Given enough time, enough courage, and enough will, someone always finds a way out. The question is whether they survive what comes after.